So can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So good morning, everyone. So today's topic is going to be about race. And I'll just give a little introduction about myself. So I'm Hcsa. I work with B-Sol Procurement Collaborative as head of data analytics, e-commerce and transactional procurement. But I'm also the deputy chair for the Edi&B network for the Hcsa, with Karen Amber and Janice Nelson. So I'll just go on to the next slide. So we're going to so I'm going to do a couple of slides, and then Luke will do a couple of slides, and then we've got a special guest presenter, Claire Rice, who will go through the rest of the deck with you all. So by the end of this session, you'll understand the difference between race and ethnicity, recognise racial and ethnic diversity in the UK, understand who the Roma, Gypsy and Traveller RGT communities are, identify barriers to NHS access for that community and other minority communities, because they obviously go through similar issues, recognise discrimination and stereotypes, and identify practical actions to improve inclusion. So under the Equality Act 2010, we have 9 protected characteristics. So I'll just go through the 9 quickly. So we've got age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex, and sexual orientation. So throughout the year, we're going to be doing a presentation on each of those characteristics, and we've had a couple already at the beginning of the year. So as I mentioned earlier, so this one's about race. So race, it's a social construct based on perceived physical differences like skin colour, and it's used for categorization. And ethnicity is a broader concept based on shared cultural identity. So it includes people's heritage, language, traditions, and ancestry. So race groups people by appearance. So people will physically just go, oh, that person could be from this particular cultural background. Ethnicity reflects their culture, so they have their belonging, their religion, and their origin. And then people can share race but have different ethnicities as well. And people can also share ethnicity but be racialized differently. So the next slide is for Luke.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Luke Shires. For those who don't know me, I'm supply chain operations manager for South Tyneside and Sunderland. I'm also on the Edi&B group with Harvey. So I'm glad to be presenting this one today, because it is something that it's a close interest of mine. Coming from a traveller background, I felt I wanted to put this forward specifically as a topic, simply because I think I've described it as sometimes an acceptable form of discrimination and racism that hasn't really, I don't feel, been fully dealt with. So I wanted to highlight it and help educate. So yeah, like Harvey said, under the Equality Act, race includes colour, nationality and ethnic or national origins. And it gives people specific protections, and Romani, Gypsies and Irish travellers are legally recognised ethnic groups. So obviously the UK is a multi-racial, multi-ethnic population, and communities varying from obviously the list there, which a list we're all used to when we're filling out forms, but just living in our communities, we know people come from a very wide range of different backgrounds, but including Roma, Gypsy and the traveller communities. And I'm really pleased that my cousin Claire, who's on the call, is going to take us through the next slides, and I'll let Claire introduce herself. But yeah, she's a strong advocate in this area, and she'll help us understand better. Claire.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Claire Rice. I'm a Romani Gypsy, and I work for an organisation called Gay Essex. We advocate and work nationally across the country, fighting for our communities. So I work across policy, I work across hate, discrimination, stereotypes. I support gypsies and travellers. I'm a Mackenzie friend, and I am the only community member in the country that is a qualified independent domestic violence advocate. Sorry, I've got an echo back on my screen, and it's just
Okay,
making me.
I'll see if everyone's on mute, Claire. It might help.
Yeah, if everyone could go on mute, that would be great. Yeah, that's better. That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah. So, bit of background about myself. I went back to uni at 40. I was a single mum, raising 3 boys. Put myself through an access course and got into Anglia Ruskin, Cambridge. On my first ever tutor meeting, I sat down with a renowned psychologist who was my tutor. And he said to me, "Can I ask why you've come back to uni at 40? And I said, "Yeah, I'd just really like to help my community." And he said, "Who's your community?" And I said, "Romany Gypsies." And he said to me, "I wouldn't advertise that if I were you." So that just gives you an indication of how non-direct and someone trying to be, in their imagination, kind and considerate to me, like, don't mention that in your career, actually is racism and prejudiced. You know, so let's be honest, if had I been 18, I'd have probably balked. And I'll just give you one more brief example. In my professional career, I trained all frontline officers of Hertfordshire Police. I went to Hertfordshire Police headquarters, sat down with the superintendent, chief inspector, and all of the instructors. Told them what I was going to do, told them who I was, etc., etc., and then left. 3 days later, the chief inspector was speaking at our conference, and he came to our conference, called myself and my boss into a room and said, "We really have to apologise to you. One of those inspectors has been reprimanded post that meeting." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, when you left," I said to him, "you were very quiet." To which he responded, "There's only one thing more dangerous than a pikey, and that's an educated pikey." So even in the headquarters of Hertfordshire Police Station, I was not immune or protected from racism. So that just gives you an idea of how easy it is for people to be racist. So that's just a brief overrun of who I am and how I came to do what I do. So Gypsies and Travellers, we are under this umbrella term of GRT. And you see it used everywhere. Gypsy, Roma, Traveller. However, within that group is an awful lot of people. So you have here Romany Gypsies, Irish Gypsies, Roma, Scottish Travellers, Welsh Travellers. So actually, these are all given names. The only name on there that is true to the culture that it represents is Roma. Romany Gypsies, the word gypsy was appointed to us in the 1600s because we were very dark-skinned and we were perceived to be Egyptian. We are actually Rom. There are tribes within Roma, and we can trace back our heritages to those tribes. There's Sinti, there are a lot. Calderdash, there are quite a few. So Romany Gypsies, we first came here in the 1500s. We originate from Asia. We are South Asian. Actually, my DNA is 26% North Asian, North Indian. Irish travellers are Germanic and arguably the indigenous people of these islands. Roma are exactly the same as Romany Gypsies, but they are less further down their nomadic route or nomadic journey than us. So you imagine my family probably settled here in the 1500s. Roma that you see on the streets now have only just come. So my evolution journey is 600 years different from theirs. However, we speak the same language, we have the same culture, and we have very similar practices. But Romany Gypsies in England, our traditions have watered down somewhat as we have assimilated with the community. Scottish travellers, they are actually Narkin, and that is their name. Welsh travellers are Kale. Irish travellers are Parve or Minka. That's their name. That's the name they use. These names you see here are categories and names given to us, not our chosen names. In that group that we don't have on the screen, there are also fairmen, showmen, they're called. They have their own language. A lot of them are mixed with Romany Gypsies, and a lot of them are not. So there's a mixture there. There's also boatmen and continuous boat dwellers that are nomadic. And there are a large nomadic boat community, and they also face huge difficulties with the NHS, registering, accessing prescriptions, that kind of stuff. So you can see within this GRT umbrella, there's an awful lot of cultures. So we're trying to break away from that umbrella term so that services and the policymakers can see the individual cultures underneath. Because you can't address an issue unless you know who you're addressing it to. So you may find, for example, Irish travellers have a much higher suicide rate than Romany Gypsies. Irish travellers have a much higher illiteracy rate than Romany Gypsies. Within the Hcsa, for example, Romany Gypsies are the highest culture that carry cystic fibrosis. So we carry the cystic fibrosis gene, and we are the highest community for that. Whereas the Irish, they have a gene which affects their iron. Now it's got a name, and I can never remember the name. Homostosis. It's iron overload. So that's genetic to the Irish travellers. So if you were going to try and tackle that and find funding, you might waste your funding by trying to address CF screening to Irish travellers, but it's not necessary. Or you might do iron overload to Romany Gypsies when it's not necessary. So you see, we need to unpack this overall umbrella term. Yeah, the health inequalities. Gypsies and travellers are likely to die 10 years before the wider population. We have higher rates of chronic illness, specifically breathing. A lot of issues around chronic asthma, CPOD, that kind of stuff. Early miscarriages are common. Early birth deaths are common. There's also issues with IVF, unpacking these things and normalising them. Mental health inequalities are tremendous. Now, there's many reasons for this. There's inherited trauma, intergenerational trauma. That is very, very common. Even with gypsies and travellers that have settled into housing and their children have assimilated into wider community, there's still that intergeneration trauma, which impacts the way our parents can parent us. because if they have unaddressed trauma, you know, it causes issues. So there are barriers to the NHS. The barriers are many receptionists don't understand you don't need a fixed abode to get access to the NHS. Most gypsies and travellers would rather access A&E than they would to doctor surgery. The appointment systems are often inflexible when it comes to gypsies and travellers, because if you're nomadic, how do you keep up with appointments? If you're living on a local authority site, often your post is not delivered direct to your pitch. Sometimes you have to go to the sorting office and collect it. Sometimes it's collected by the landlords and then delivered. So often appointments are missed. So we find within the NHS that often appointments are missed and then they are put down as a missed appointment and taken off the list. So there has to be some kind of conversation that the NHS practitioners can be prepared to have with their clients. You know, do you receive your mail? How would be the best way to send you an appointment? That kind of stuff. And as the NHS moves forward, I've just written a report on the 10-year NHS plan. It's good, but nomadic gypsies and travellers, nomadic boat dwellers, showmen, people that are travelling for economic purposes may well be digitally excluded. Now, gypsies and travellers, they'll use TikTok, they'll use WhatsApp, and people think, well, you've got a phone, you're using it. But what you don't realise is that they use it by voice note. That's how they do things. So if they communicate with me, I will get a WhatsApp and I'll get a voice note. And I'll respond in a voice note. Because they can't necessarily read. And if they can read, some don't have the language skills. If they live on a site, they may be very insular. If they're nomadic, they may be very insular. They have their own languages, plus their own colloquial languages. So trust and marginalisation, that's been historic forever. You know, it's a hostile environment that gypsies and travellers live in. If you think of all the things you see on the telly, of all the things you see in the newspapers, of all the reports that you see, things like my big fat gypsy wedding, which is the question that everyone always asks. So I'm going to address that right now. That has as much to do with my life as EastEnders does to yours. So it's not true. In Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, for example, there was a big fuss made in the media about Irish travellers' practice of grabbing. It's not real. They don't do it. The boys made it up. They thought it was funny. They thought it was really, really funny to have these gorges on and tell them something and see how far it would go. So the whole country was taken for a fall because it was all on the newspapers. This is sexual assault. This is, you know, not right. This is not what people should do. It's not true. So it just goes to show that people have stopped being inquisitive about gypsies and travellers. They think, oh, I know one down the pub. Or I've got a mate down the corner. Or my next door neighbour, they come from a gypsy and traveller heritage. So I know them. I went to school with one. So they stop asking. They think, they assume, and they know. My main thing that I really wanted to get over to you is that you don't know who is a gypsy or traveller. You would not know specifically that either Luke or I come from a gypsy or traveller heritage. Just like you wouldn't know if the lady in Marks and Spencer's serving you behind the counter. Because my ethnicity is not entirely obvious on my skin. Now, I can't tell you how many pubs I've worked in where the landlord has said to me, we don't serve gypsies and travellers. And I've had to respond, well, this gypsy's not serving your beer either. Because that is the truth. You don't know who you are asking to exclude their own ethnicity. And that's why it's easy to say that racism against gypsies and travellers is the only acceptable or the last bastion of acceptable racism in this country. You know, you hear things like, especially in schools, you know, your mum bought your trainers from Asda's, but you didn't buy them from a Nike shop, you're a pikey. You're a child that's sitting in the back of the classroom who says, they're not the pikey, I am. So what I'm saying to you is, my culture is used to insult one settled member of the community will use that to insult another member. And this is the kind of way that these things can slip into an office, they can slip into an everyday conversation. And I'm just asking, just be aware of what you're saying and always question stereotypes. You know, we're not all the same. I'm a criminologist. I'm not going to say to you that every member of our communities is perfect. No more than any of you can sit there and tell me that any member of your community is perfect. We have good and bad in all walks of life. Gypsies and travellers don't all live in caravans, don't all live in sites. The majority of us are housed. In fact, 88% of us are housed. And 75% of us are educated. But the other 25% are not. And they require and need our support. And they need equal access. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to have a really open and honest dialogue. Like I can give you facts and figures. But what I find is to open the floor and to ask you to be open and honest. There is no question that would put me off. Let's address the stereotypes. Let's address the elephant in the room. Anything you want to know, any questions you want to ask, please do ask. You know, interrupt me at any moment in time. Yes, Luke.
Claire, I'll go first. I'll get us going.
Yes.
So something I do find difficult is challenging people, say in an open office, if there's I have experienced that in recent times, not here, where a comment is made, but because I'm a nice guy, I don't want to embarrass people in front of their colleagues. So I find it difficult to pick them up on what they've said. So what would you suggest in those kind of instances when you want to, you know, not necessarily me, but anybody want to step up and intervene or pick someone up? What's a good way of doing it?
Well, I mean, there's ways. When I used to work in pubs, you can imagine there'd been encampment pulled into the town. And this is another thing that I just wanted to make you all aware of. Encampment does pull into your town. Please have a thought for your settled gypsy and traveller community. Those ones that you say, oh, I know one, they live down the road, live down in the pub. And I'll tell you why. It's when the encampment does put in, that's when the racism starts. And it will be everywhere. And everyone will be talking, lock your sheds. There's a encampment pulled onto the park. Lock your sheds, they're in the area. Right. Now, this is a prime example of what Luke is talking about. Because these things are discussed in the office. And as a gypsy or traveller, you kind of shrink because you think, they think I'm going to steal their purse? Do they think I'm going to raid their sheds? If I come round for a cup of tea, do they make that comment before I get that? And of course, the comment would be, we don't mean you. We mean those other gypsies, right? So when it comes to pulling people up, Luke, sometimes I will let them say what they say. And then I say something like, the rest of us are okay. And that usually makes them go, "What?" Which is a bit passive aggressive, or just a quiet word on the side. You know, the situation is over. Just say, I heard what you said, and I understand. I mean, it doesn't need to be a conflict because people are only going by what they know. And if you are that gypsy or traveller or that gypsy or traveller ally, that's your chance to present a different face and say, actually, I'm from that community and we've worked together for 10 years. So, or 5 years, and we've never ever had an issue. So therefore, we're not all bad, are we? So I apologise for the one that you met that was bad, but we're not all bad. So does anyone else have any questions?
Thanks, Claire.
Oh, sorry, Luke, go on.
No, it's just saying thank you.
No. Come on, I know you've got some questions. You want to ask me about the big fat gypsy wedding? Do we all wear the big wedding dresses? Josie.
Yeah, Lee. I'll ask you a question. Thanks for the presentation so far, very informative. When you opened up, you talked about being a representative, also of the gay community. Yet you've not gotten into that on this situation, on your presentation so far, because I guess the topic isn't that. But is there any more you can tell us about that overlap and any niche areas there? Anything we can learn on that?
What? Sorry,
you said at the you said at the start that you were a representative also in the gay community. Was that right, or did I mishear you?
Yes. So we have a lot of gypsies and travellers, which are now thankfully open. We are allies of them. In fact, our chair is an Irish traveller, LGBT advocate. He faced lots of issues in his community. He was beaten, he was ostracised, forced into crime. He is a very, very powerful speaker. I can sort of give you a brief rundown on his history, but to listen to him speak is really, really powerful. LGBT situation within our community it's always been there. We've always had spinsters, bachelors that have companions. But it's not something that's ever been open and talked about. But actually, gypsies and travellers are a lot more tolerant than people think. So I've got a question for you, Joseph.
Yes.
Are you from the community?
I am not.
Are you sure with your surname?
Well, I believe, I might be wrong, that there should be an S on the end of my surname that I don't know, whatever reason, got lost through the way. And it's from Lithuania, but I don't know.
Well, the Lees are K or Welsh gypsies.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I'm sure you do. Any questions about your experiences within the LHS? Well, I'll give you some that I've heard. So from nurses and stuff, when I've done other meetings with NHS, gypsies and travellers, we are community, family focused. Like, you will get a call and we've all got to go. If one of our aunts is not well, one of our parents, one of the cousins, then one phone call and the whole family will go. and it has to be like that. So that can be very off-putting in a medical surrounding. So if you're prepared, you know, and you can say, you know, there's a family room where you can all gather. You have one at the bed. You can go and keep the family up to date. That is the best way to handle it. But we have come across some situations where that's not been understood. They've not understood why an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old woman is presenting at the doctor's with her mum as a chaperone or with her older sister. Because with the new coercive control, which is 100% right, it can be looked at that it's coercive control, that she can't even attend a medical appointment on her own. But actually, it's in our culture, it's normal. That's what we do. You know, our children are nomadic, even when we lived in houses. Me specifically, my childhood, I lived with all of my relatives. I've lived with Luke, I've lived with other aunts, uncles, because that's how we do. So when I present to social services, for example, I will say to them, if you go to a gypsy or traveller house, you could come to my house and I could have 6 children. And you say to me, who are these 3? Well, they're my sisters. When are they going home? Don't know. When's she going to come pick them up? Don't know. How long are they staying? Till they're bored. And then they'll go home. And my 3 might go with them. It's always a case of who's got better dinner, because I'm going there. But if you don't understand that as a cultural practice, it can look like neglect. And I understand that. And I understand that some of our practices can look, from the outside looking in, a little strange. So we have a practice called sitting up. This is specific to Romany gypsies. When someone dies, we believe that the spirit does not leave the body until they are buried. Well, actually, we used to burn them in the wagon. Luke and my great-grandfather was burnt in his wagon, and that was the last one, because we can no longer do it by law. So we have a practice, and it's called sitting up. We build a big fire. We all sit up all night. Everyone sits around, tells stories about the person that's deceased. There's tea made. There's strictly no alcohol. There's tea made, sandwiches, and we sit up. Someone will be awake near that body until that body is buried. Now, when the fire brigades often turn up, so I've had meetings with fire brigades, often turn up, they get a report from neighbours, there's a big fire, there's men, the fire is huge. No. So of course the fire brigade turn up, they all jump out, and they say, what's going on? And they're met with a grieving family, emotions are high. So I've had a conversation, explained, actually, this, is a cultural echo. And it's a cultural echo from the funeral pyres in India. So that's where that tradition has come from. Romany gypsies still hold that part of the tradition, but we have changed it into our own version. We call it sitting up. So it's just an example. So now the fire brigade still go, but one member will get out of the fire engine, and his first comment is, "We're very sorry for your loss. We've come to make sure that everyone is safe." That enables a completely different conversation, a different narrative, and less friction for the service, less upset for the community. And that is my role. Harvey.
I'm just going to add a little bit to what you're saying, Claire. So when I looked into, obviously, the Roma Gypsy community, they originate from northern India. So a lot of the Roma gypsies travel from there over the years, and it was mainly to find work. So it was just that there wasn't local jobs around. So people used to travel from their homes, and then they just used to get work wherever they traveled. And then eventually over the years, they traveled out into Europe, weren't it? So that's kind of how it all originated. But I come from a Sikh background. What you mentioned there about culture is the same. So like weddings and events. So my dad would be invited to a wedding back in the day when we were young, and it used to say Mr. Singh and family. And he used to literally take everybody, he used to ask the neighbours, because obviously we have alcohol at the party and we have big parties. He used to say to the neighbours, oh, well, we've got a wedding, we're going to the temple part in the morning. Later on, the local community centre is going to be the big wedding. And our neighbours would literally turn up to the wedding. He'd literally invite everybody. We used to think, like, what the hell? Like, he's invited about 10 people and it says Mr. Singh and family. Then over the years, I've noticed obviously traditions are changing, and now due to affordability, the weddings, they started making them more like, invite only. It's a table of like 4 people or a family. They ask you how many people come in. So I think it's changed. But I remember as a child going to Indian wedding, and there'd be like 1,000+ people at the wedding. And a lot of them would be people's neighbours just gate crashing the party later on, because that's just the community spirit. And the same thing with regards to if someone's ill in hospital, literally the whole family turns up and they'll wait outside and take their turns to go and see the person, rather than, two at a bed thing. So I can see the similarities there from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, there are huge similarities between Sikh, Muslim, Indian community and Romanian gypsies. Yeah, so sorry, I can see someone's hand up.
Yeah, Janice.
Janice.
Oh, hi, apologies,
Hi,
I was a bit late. I'm just really intrigued by everything you're saying, Claire, because I'm a nurse by background, and I have worked as a health visitor, and where I worked in the city, Birmingham, we have a large travelling community. And I suppose for me, it had to be flexible in my approach really to visiting folks. I hate the term hard to reach, because nobody's hard to reach. You just have to be flexible and adapt according to the needs. So I just wonder from your perspective, and I think I know what the answer is. Rather than labeling, and I did miss a bit of your presentation, so you may have covered this already. So rather than labeling and having really negative thoughts about some of the travelling community, that's from an NHS clinical. Would you say that we do need the culture training? We need to understand the culture, the isms, rather than negatively assume that there's issues when you turn. And I'm thinking about the front door at A&E, when you turn up into a fast moving environment, because you had it on one of your slides there. I'll be involved in a lot of culture training. I'm part of a culture group within the trust, and that's something that I really want for us to look at, not just specifically about race, but really within the teams as well. But race does fall within it. So I just wanted to glean your thoughts, Claire, on it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think we need to get away from race and even ethnicity. And I think we just need to look at communities, just understand what each community, how each community lives. Because we assume, but we don't know. And as a practitioner, you're going in and out of many, many communities. And to be fair, there's lots of information out there. There's been lots of research. For example, I've just written a paper about second generation Irish, and that's looking at identity. It's not this idea of identity. So again, it's about ethnicity not being obvious on your skin. So with an Irish traveller, for example, they may be second, third generation. They still maintain the Irish accent. They're still called an Irish traveller, but they've never been to Ireland in their life. They couldn't find Ireland on a map. They're too English to be accepted as Irish, and too Irish to be accepted as English. So they live in this no man's land of labelled Irish traveller. Because when they go back to Ireland, there's no such thing as an Irish traveller. They're tinkers or minkers. So it's interesting, this identity, and it's unpacking that. It's cultural practices and cultural understanding within services. It's paramount. It saves you time. It saves you money. It saves you professional reputations. Because if you can unpack, if you've got a health visitor that understands before she goes what a chalet is, what an outdoor room is, what do they mean by they have to take the 18-month-old baby outside to teach her toilet training. If they understand that, those aren't red flags. If they don't understand that, they are red flags. If a health visitor sits in a room and a mum comes in and says, when I have to toilet train her at 2 o'clock in the morning, I have to take her outside in the cold, it would be a red flag. If they knew that what she actually meant was she's leaving the chalet and she's going to the day room, which is heated 3 yards away from the front door, it wouldn't be a red flag. And it would save all of that time of having to investigate. If they had it in the back of their heads and go, I'm going to ring this woman about her children, but she tells me they're not here. They're at my sister's. And so I'll ring her the next week. And she tells me the same thing. That starts to be a red flag. Is that neglect? Is there a problem within that family? And rightly so. And rightly so should be investigated. However, if the head is in the back of the head, is this a cultural practice? Is this quite normal within their family that for 3 months this child will go and live with this aunt, and then she may be with the next aunt, and then she may be 300 miles up the road with another family, and then she might come home? This is not neglect. There's not a problem within the family. This is just how we live. And that would give you an insight, because then actually, within gypsy and traveller families, if those children aren't that nomadic, if there isn't a family contact, if this girl is telling me she's not seeing her mum and her sister isn't coming to her appointments, that's your red flag, because she's under control by her husband. That's your red flag. So what I'm telling you is, if you don't understand cultural practices, you will misread red flags.
Now, you see, I didn't realise all of that in terms of a child being mobile and being moved around, because that would have raised a safeguarding. And I think what you're saying really is about cultural competence. It doesn't mean that, we have to know everything, but if we can have an understanding. Now, you see, that's new to me, and that would have raised issues and I can see it. So for me, I think there's something about cultural competence for staff, for everybody, wherever we are, within teams, within, I come from a clinical background, so it would be within the initial nurse training, I don't know, doctors, etc. I can see how it should be core. Thank you, though, for
Thank you.
Luke's got his hand up.
Yeah. So Janice, in your obviously you're clinical, I'm not. Is there differences, a lot of differences in your Statman training that you do each year in terms of understanding issues like this, or does it not exist?
It doesn't exist. We do not have any cultural training.
Right.
We don't have any. It would just be really shared knowledge within the team. It's not mandatory.
It really is important, Janice.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you saw earlier, that I did say that I'm the only community member in the country that is a trained independent domestic violence advocate. So that's, I understand from a safeguarding point of view. That's why I push cultural competency.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
domestic violence is in my community, it's in our communities, it's in all our communities. You know, we'd all like to say it isn't, but let's be honest. And if we can't, as frontline professionals, pick up on the right red flags, this is how it's still right in my community, because we present differently in that circumstance. You know, it's not at all uncommon for a woman to say, no idea how much money we've got in the bank account. No idea. No, I've got a bank card. No, got no access to cash. But that doesn't mean that when she says to her husband, leave me £200 on the table tomorrow morning, that £200 not there, because it is. It's not financial coercion. That's a cultural practice. So it's you need to know, if you are a safeguarding lead or you are tasked with safeguarding, you need to know the nuances. Otherwise, the safeguarding practice is not working properly for our community. Does that make sense, Janice?
It does. And I was thinking from a procurement perspective, I recently led from a clinical procurement on the tender of some pressure area care products, beds. So, for instance, if a member of your community needed a pressure relieving mattress in their home or any of the equipment. So we had a day with the suppliers, and I asked the question, if you delivered to a home where English wasn't a first language, what would you do? Or similarly to if English was their first language, and say, for instance, your cultural practice within your home, you know, there's some different that may you know, they may not understand what are you going to do about it. And they said, you know, about getting leaflets done in, you know, printed in different languages and stuff. But it started to make me think, actually, from a procurement perspective, we sometimes miss the patient at the end of you know, at the end of the product. We see the product, we see the supplier, but we don't often highlight the patient, the end users, staff, yes, but not the patients, that the benefactors of it. So from a procurement perspective and the products that we're using, have you or any of the community encountered any issues when things have been delivered, or any kind of misunderstanding?
So, no, sorry, yeah. No, I mean, I don't think there's any issues with that. We do have conditions which aren't taken into account. So we have what's called Mogadai. That's a law that Romani live by, very similar to Jewish. We don't eat meat on Good Friday, very religious. We have our own cutlery, our own plates, our own cups. They're not shared. My grandmother, when she washed up, would wash my grandfather's stuff, clean the sink. She would wash my dad's, clean the sink. Everything would be dried and put away, and then she would do hers. Everything would be dried, put away, the sink would be clean again, and then she would do mine. That's how it was done. And there are many still traditional that will do the same. We have cups for visitors, and then we have cups in our house that are just ours. I can guarantee if I go to one of my aunts now, she'll make me a cup of tea in the same cup I've always had a cup of tea in since I was a very little girl. I can guarantee that cup will be in the back of her cupboard somewhere, but it will be there. And that's part of our, and that needs to be taken into account within the NHS. You would offer kosher, you would offer halal. Do you ask other communities, other ethnic races, do you have any cultural practice? Because we wouldn't wash meat in the same bowl that we would wash vegetables. We have like different, you know, actually my kitchen looks like Hcsa. It's got different buckets for different things, different bowls for different things, different cups for different things. Very similar to Jewish. So you can see that Roman gypsies have picked up bits of other people's cultures and they've absorbed them as they've nomadically gone around the world. So, you know, actually, there isn't, if you sat down and came and lived in my house for a week, you would identify parts of all of your cultures. You would probably say, that's ours. Why are you doing it? And I go, I don't know, we just do. But yeah, that makes sense. So even within the food, within hospitals, you know, there has to be some cultural flexibility. Does anyone else? I'm conscious we're getting close to the end. Anybody else have any more questions? No? I've talked you all to death.
No, it's good job, Claire. I think everybody would have learned a lot there, even me.
Yeah. My cup's still in your mum's cupboard, Luke.
Yeah, it will be.
Well, I have really enjoyed speaking to you all today. And Luke and Harvey have my email address. If anyone would like to contact me privately, like if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask and just didn't feel brave enough, some people just don't like coming on screen. But yeah, anything you'd like to ask, please do ask. And if you'd like to kind of have a meeting with me later on in the future, I'm happy to, my inbox is always open. And I can always find other organisations, other advocates across the country that are in your area, if ever you need someone to kind of come to a meeting or anything like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Claire. And
Thanks,
Luke, thank you
Yeah,
everyone for participating as well. I think it was a fantastic session. And really, really good to have you on, Claire, because you've got all the knowledge. So I think it's fantastic. And it's really insightful to discuss an area that we don't normally discuss, isn't it? It's a different area that's usually missed again. So thank you, everyone. And it's perfect time as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a few minutes left. I'll share Claire's email address in the chat as well. If you've got access to this still, you can see it there. If anyone wants to reach out to